Picture this, a shadowy harbor in the dead of night, where men disguised as Mohawks hurled chests of tea into the icy waters, defying an empire. This wasn't just vandalism, it was the spark that ignited a revolution. But what if I told you the American Revolution didn't start with the famous shots at Lexington and Concord? No, the real fire began years earlier, in the taverns and town halls of Massachusetts, where ordinary colonists plotted against the might of Britain. A hidden history of power struggles, economic betrayal, and radical ideas that turned a quiet colony into the cradle of independence. Buckle up as we uncover where the fight for America truly began and why it still echoes in our world today. In the early 1600s, the winds of change swept across the Atlantic, carrying dreamers and dissenters to a rugged, untamed land. Massachusetts wasn't born from gold rushes or royal decrees. It emerged from the raw ambition of religious refugees fleeing persecution in England. The Pilgrims, those hardy souls aboard the Mayflower, stepped onto Plymouth Rock in 1620, not with fanfare, but with a desperate pact for survival. They drafted the Mayflower Compact, a simple document that planted the seed of self-governance, declaring that laws would be made by the people, for the people. It was revolutionary in its quiet way, a blueprint for democracy scribbled on the edge of a wilderness. But let's not romanticize it. This new world was already home to the Wampanoag people, led by figures like Massasoit, who initially forged uneasy alliances with these newcomers. Trade in furs and tools flowed, but so did disease and distrust. Smallpox ravaged native communities, wiping out villages and shifting the balance of power overnight. The colonists, driven by their Puritan zeal, saw this land as a city upon a hill, a divine experiment in moral living. John Winthrop's vision inspired settlements like Boston, where strict codes governed everything from Sabbath observance to family life. Yet beneath the piety simmered tensions. Witch hunts in Salem in 1692 exposed the dark underbelly of fear and fanaticism, where accusations flew like daggers, claiming 20 lives in a frenzy of paranoia. As the 17th century wore on, Massachusetts transformed from isolated outposts into a bustling network of farms and ports. Cod fishing boomed, turning the sea into a highway of wealth. Merchants in Boston amassed fortunes, shipping lumber, fish, and rum across the empire. But this prosperity came at a cost. King Philip's War in 1675 pitted colonists against native alliances in a brutal conflict that scorched the landscape. Villages burned, families were torn apart, and by the end, the native hold on the land was shattered. Massachusetts emerged stronger, its borders expanded but scarred by the blood of conquest. This was no gentle founding, it was a forge of resilience, where survival meant adaptation and sometimes ruthless ambition. From these humble, harsh beginnings, a colony was molding itself into something far greater, setting the stage for defiance against the very crown that once sheltered it. Fast forward to the mid-1700s, and the air in Massachusetts crackled with unease. The 7 Years' War had just ended, leaving Britain drowning in debt and eyeing its colonies as a cash cow. Enter the Stamp Act of 1765, a tax on everything from newspapers to playing cards, imposed without a whisper of colonial consent. In Boston's crowded streets, this wasn't just about money, it was a slap in the face to the hard-won autonomy forged generations ago. No taxation without representation became the rallying cry, echoing from dockyards to drawing rooms. Samuel Adams, that fiery brewer turned revolutionary mastermind, stirred the pot like no one else. He organized the Sons of Liberty, a shadowy group that blended protest with intimidation. They hung effigies of tax collectors from liberty trees, tarred and feathered loyalists, and turned public outrage into a weapon. But it was the Boston Massacre in 1770 that truly shifted the sands. On a snowy March evening, British soldiers faced a jeering mob outside the custom house. Stones flew, shots rang out, and 5 colonists lay dead, including Crispus Attucks, a man of African and native descent who became the first martyr of the cause. Paul Revere's engraving of the scene, exaggerated for maximum impact, spread like wildfire, painting the British as butchers and fueling a narrative of oppression. Yet amid the growing storm, Massachusetts wasn't all firebrands. Loyalists whispered in parlors, fearing anarchy more than taxes. Economic ties to Britain ran deep. Merchants like John Hancock smuggled goods to evade duties, turning evasion into an art form. The The Townshend Acts added fuel, taxing tea, glass, and paint, sparking boycotts that united housewives and artisans in a web of resistance. Women spun their own cloth, shunning British imports in acts of quiet rebellion. And then came the Tea Act of 1773, a corporate bailout for the East India Company that undercut local smugglers. Adams and his allies saw red. In secret meetings at the Green Dragon Tavern, plans coalesced. The turning point wasn't a single event, but a cascade, a colony awakening to its own power, where economic grievances morphed into a quest for liberty. As tensions simmered, Massachusetts stood on the brink, its people no longer subjects, but architects of their fate. The night of December 16, 1773 changed everything. Under a sliver of moon, over 100 Sons of Liberty, faces blackened and feathered, boarded 3 ships in Boston Harbor. Axes swung, chests splintered, and 342 crates of tea, worth a fortune, plunged into the salty depths. The Boston Tea Party wasn't a prank. It was economic sabotage, a direct challenge to British authority that screamed, "We are done playing by your rules." King George III raged, closing Boston's port and dissolving the Colonial Assembly in the intolerable acts. Massachusetts was under siege, its economy strangled, its freedoms curtailed. But instead of breaking, the colony united. The First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia, but the real pulse beat in Massachusetts. Militias drilled on village greens, stockpiling powder and shot. Paul Revere's midnight ride on April 18, 1775 wasn't just folklore, it was the frantic warning that British troops were marching to seize arms in Concord. At Lexington, the Minutemen stood firm. "Stand your ground," Captain John Parker urged. The shot heard round the world cracked the dawn, killing 8 colonists and igniting open war. The Battle of Bunker Hill followed, a Pyrrhic victory for the British that exposed their vulnerabilities. Colonial snipers picked off redcoats from Breed's Hill, inflicting heavy casualties before retreating. Blood soaked the Charlestown soil, but morale soared among the rebels. Siege gripped Boston, with George Washington arriving to command the ragtag Continental Army. Evacuation Day in March 1776 saw the British sail away, a humiliating retreat. Yet controversies lingered, loyalists fled in droves, their properties seized in a wave of reprisals. Darker still, the Revolution's promise of liberty clashed with the reality of slavery. Massachusetts harbored abolitionist stirrings, but freedom rang hollow for the enslaved. This conflict reshaped power dynamics. Massachusetts became the upper St., its ports buzzing with privateers harassing British ships, its intellectuals like John Adams drafting ideas that would birth a nation. The shift wasn't just military, it was ideological, turning a provincial backwater into the forge of independence. As battles raged elsewhere, the spirit kindled here spread, proving that a small colony could topple an empire. With independence won in 1783, Massachusetts didn't rest on laurels. The post-war era brought chaos. Shays' rebellion in 1786 saw debt-ridden farmers storm courthouses, demanding relief from crushing taxes. It exposed the Articles of Confederation's weaknesses, spurring the Constitutional Convention. James Budden and others pushed for a stronger union, with Massachusetts ratifying the Constitution in 1788 after fierce debates. Federalists like Adams triumphed, but not without the Bill of Rights as a concession. The 19th century ushered in transformation. The Industrial Revolution hit Massachusetts like a steam engine. Lowell's textile mills rose along the Merrimack River, drawing young women from farms into factories, a radical shift that birthed America's first industrial workforce. Canals and railroads spud the state, linking Boston to the hinterlands and beyond. Whaling fleets from Nantucket and New Bedford dominated the seas, harvesting oil that lit the world. But this rise masked shadows: child labor in mills, immigrant exploitation in sweatshops, and the Triangle Trade's lingering stain, where Massachusetts ships once carried enslaved Africans. Education became a powerhouse. Harvard, founded in 1636, evolved into a global beacon, joined by MIT and others. Intellectual ferment bred transcendentalists like Umpson and Thoreau, whose ideas on self-reliance influenced generations. Politically, figures like Daniel Webster thundered in Senate halls, shaping national policy. The abolition movement ignited here, William Ludd Garrison's Liberator newspaper blasted slavery, while Herat Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin galvanized the North. Massachusetts led in reforms, public schools, women's rights at Seneca Falls roots, and by the Civil War, sent regiments like the 54th, the first African-American unit, into glory at Fort Wagner. Economically, Boston's Brahmins amassed wealth in finance and shipping, turning the city into a hub of influence. From whaling fortunes to railroad tycoons, power concentrated, but not without strife. Lubbock's strikes in Lawrence in 1912 highlighted class divides. Through it all, Massachusetts ascended, its innovations and ideals propelling America forward, a state where brains and brawn built an enduring legacy. Today, Massachusetts pulses with the echoes of its revolutionary past, but it's no relic. The Athens of America has morphed into a tech titan, with Route 128 and Cundall Square birthing giants like Ruthven and biotech firms revolutionizing medicine. Harvard and MIT draw the world's brightest, fueling startups that tackle climate change, AI, and pandemics. Think mRNA vaccines, pioneered here, saving millions during COVID. Politically, the state remains a powerhouse. From the Canadas, Camelot to modern senators shaping policy on healthcare and equality, Massachusetts influences Washington profoundly. Universal healthcare, first tested here under Rumner, became a national model. Yet controversies persist. The big dig's cost overruns exposed corruption, while the opioid crisis ravages communities, mirroring historical battles with vice. Culturally, Boston's Freedom Trail draws millions, reminding us of liberty's cost. Sports dynasties like the Patriots embody resilience, while diverse immigrants from Asia and Latin America enrich the fabric. Economically, it's a leader in green energy and finance, with Boston's skyline symbolizing innovation. Why does it matter? In an era of division, Massachusetts shows how radical ideas, from revolution to reform, can unite and propel progress. Its history isn't just past. It's a playbook for facing today's challenges, proving that from humble beginnings, enduring influence is born. As the sun sets over Boston Harbor, where tea once sank an empire, consider this: Massachusetts didn't just start a revolution, it redefined what it means to fight for freedom. In its streets and stories, we see the timeless struggle between power and the people, innovation and injustice. What sparks will ignite tomorrow's changes? The cradle of liberty whispers, it's up to us to listen and act.